Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. We will just wait 30 seconds-ish to get people into the webinar. Let me just see. Yeah, people are already coming in. Great job. Yes, I think that must be about 30 seconds. Maybe I should have timed it. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Automate Troubling GRC Tasks. And I'm Michelle, and I'm the Marketing Manager in Business Now. And with me today, I have Søren Riss-Vestergaard, and he's a corporate IT manager for like 15 years, and which means he's been working with GRC for quite some time. He's been involved. He's involved in a big GRC project in the banking sector. Can you say hi, Søren?
Hello, everybody. We're looking forward to this webinar.
Yes. And oh, sorry. I just want to make sure. I'm not sure you can see me right now, and on my screen I'm seeing somebody else. So I hope you can see me. So this is Lars Kristian Larsen. Right now you can say hi now, Lars. That's okay.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, and so Lars Kristian Larsen is an ITSM expert, and he's an information security lead implementer and an internal auditor. And he has worked with the GRC projects both with and without the support from the Servicenow GRC application. So both are more than capable of taking you through today's topic. Just some quick practical stuff. In this webinar, you will this webinar will be 45 minutes, and we will record this webinar, and you will receive the recording via email tomorrow. And also, you will find the recording on our YouTube channel later this week, and we will share all this information on our LinkedIn page. So just make sure you follow us there so that you can get the newest information. And if you have any questions during this webinar, please use the Q&A function in the bottom of your screen. And if you want to make sure you get an answer, if we don't have the time in the webinar, just make sure to let us know who you are so that we can contact you afterwards. So without further ado, I think we should get started. Enjoy.
Thank you. So Lars Kristian and I, we have divided this webinar between us so that I will take you through the first half, and Lars Kristian will take you through the second half. And please proceed, Lars Kristian. Okay, so what we will talk about, and this is what was announced before the webinar, we will give a short introduction to what is it actually, the governance, risk and compliance practice, and what, based on our experience, what is there to especially watch out for in your GRC practice. And we will also share some tips for building a corporate business case for GRC based on 3 pillars, and we'll return to that later. So if you need something like a good, let's say a strong case for going to your leadership, the board, and say we need to invest more in good GRC practice, we can perhaps help you with this. And then I'll leave the floor to Lars Kristian, and he will take you through how Servicenow, in a very elegant and well-designed structure, will help you with your GRC endeavors. And when using that, how you can end up being quite excited about your next audit, which is something we definitely are not used to being excited. I mean, so this is the agenda, and please proceed. Okay, so what is it actually we're talking about here? So GRC is a methodology which helps you manage something which nobody has actually chosen to focus on, but we have to focus on GRC, because without focusing on GRC and creating a good GRC practice, we will not be able to be successful in whatever we dream about doing. So in general, GRC is the governance of how we manage risks and compliance. So risk is whenever something is uncertain, we want to achieve some objectives, and there's some uncertainty in how and if we can achieve them, we are subject to risk. And we need some awareness of which risks are there, and we need some awareness of how risk willing we are to activate certain things in order to achieve the objectives we want without exposing ourselves to too much risk. And compliance is in general rules, regulations, even policies that you create yourself in your organization, that you say, this is how we want to conduct our business, this is how we want to collaborate, and we have policies to guide us with that. And we need a practice to ensure that we are in compliance with that. Yes?
I really like also the expression from the General Attorney Paul McNulty on the left side, because a lot of that what we're looking at is often non-compliance issues, where you read about fines and you hear about situations where people are getting let off because they didn't do their job correct. So I don't think that needs to be a driver, but it needs to be something that we should think about.
Great. Okay, so GRC is basically about doing whatever we want to do and doing it in the right way. So doing the right thing, you could say, that doesn't need to include any GRC practice. You have visions, you have goals, you have profit, you want to, some profit margin you want to achieve, or new markets. And this is driven by our visions, our desire to succeed. But GRC is actually about balancing all these, let's call them dreams and desires, to balance them with some overall, you could call it ethics, adhering to whichever rules, regulation, how you delegate authority. I remember when I was the corporate IT manager, I could spend up to a certain amount of money without asking the board of directors. And I always joked about, so I had to split the invoices in more than one invoice to keep under that limit. But of course, that was just a joke, but it's about delegation of authority and how which decision can be made and which level in the organization, and also about internal policies about acceptable conduct. So this is business performance while serving the larger field of society, humankind, global sustainability, or whichever other ethics, rules, and regulations you are obliged to comply to. Thank you.
Have you ever experienced situations where people are trying to do it, basically the wrong way because they wanted to do it the wrong way?
Yes, actually, when we prepared this webinar, Lars Kristian, we talked about things that are sort of on the verge of criminal activity. So the one thing is, it's almost impossible to be certain that nobody can do any criminal acts, but it's also about doing things that may not be acceptable according to, let's say, an HR policy. And in these days of Me Too, in the most possible sense of the word, it's even how we interact with our colleagues, and also how we express respect for the other sex. So this is all within the scope of GRC if we choose to let it be that.
Yeah. So basically, you could say that laundering money is, there are a lot of cunning people who are doing the best they can to avoid getting caught with that. So what we are trying to achieve is a situation where we are putting in governance, risk, and compliance to identify and also set up barriers that it's not possible to do it. So doing it the right way is trying to avoid people doing it the wrong way. So obviously money laundering, quite an extreme example, but there are other situations, and you mentioned one about the situation about, you know, thresholds that you might want to find ways to get around it. Obviously you shouldn't do that, but no, that's a situation that we're trying to avoid.
Great, thank you. Okay, so things to watch out for in your GRC practice. Yes. So I think this is the most text-heavy slide in the slide deck, but please bear with me. So it's important to acknowledge and remember that GRC is something you do for your organization to succeed. So if you're involved in GRC, you're actually helping your business succeed. It's not like being a bad cop or being, you know, the annoying nagging. It's actually about aligning GRC practice to what your organization wants to achieve in order to do the right thing and enough things to ensure that things are done correctly, in balanced with what your business or your organization wants to achieve. So GRC objectives should be achievable and hopefully measurable. Lars Kristian will be returning to this subject later, because one of the benefits, or maybe not, depending on how you regard it, of using Servicenow is that you become very transparent in whether GRC objectives are achieved or not. So using the traditional tools for GRC, Excel sheets and Outlook, actually creates a wider area of, you know, how you can sort of be a bit more, let's call it hazy about your GRC achievements. So GRC can potentially grow completely out of proportion. I remember one situation from a Danish municipality where they had in the IT organization, they hired a newly graduated GRC expert, and she was unstoppable. You know, so she was like, you know, people really grew tired of hearing, because everything they did, you know, she was whipping them with how GRC should be part of that. And that's, of course, it's not wrong to think that way, but you should know how to do it perhaps in a bit more musical fashion. So what you can do is that you can learn to love the auditors, and if you do, they will also love you, internal or external auditors. And what I mean by that is, for instance, I helped at one time, I helped an insurance company creating an IT continual improvement practice. And we actually included the auditors in the continual improvement practice, because what the auditors actually do is to suggest things that you might consider do differently and better than you do today. So it's actually a valid input for your continual improvement to use the auditors. And if you start talking with and communicating with the auditors with that mindset, it might create quite a different and better situation than what you might have been used to. You should also know which rules, regulation, and guidelines are optional. So which are, you know, somebody say that the speed limit on the freeway is optional. No, it's actually mandatory. But there are other rules which may be optional about how you conduct how you drive and how you interact with other cars the freeway. So it's good to know what is optional and what is absolutely necessary in order to participate in the business you're participating in. So also third parties. I mean, if you are using, let's say, suppliers in the Far East, for instance, are they in scope of your GRC? How they conduct, how they treat their employees? Today in 2021, they probably are. Maybe 15 years ago, nobody cared much about it, but today it is actually part of your reputation risk that if your suppliers are sort of mentioned in the press as having a really unethical practice, this may actually be a risk for your business. So, and GRC is not a one-person effort. Somebody should be responsible for organizing and orchestrating the GRC practice, but it's actually orchestrating how others will do GRC on a day-to-day basis. Thank you, Lars Kristian. So one story which for me flashed a light bulb in my head regarding GRC was when I talked to a mountaineer, a mountain climber, and for instance, he said there's a vision about, for instance, reaching the summit of Mount Everest, and you can see this photo here that Michelle has included, with that on a good day on Mount Everest, not good in other respects than the weather, you know, there are actually hundreds of people on the way up and then afterwards on the way down, while others are still on their way up. So it's about having a vision about reaching, for instance, the summit of Mount Everest, but also how do we avoid falling down, freezing to death, choking in the thin air, risks that are inherent in reaching the summit of Mount Everest, and also about being in compliance with any rules and guidelines that apply for mountaineers in Nepal. And these are numerous, these rules, and specifically on Mount Everest, for instance, bringing your garbage with you down. And if you're above 6,000 meters, you don't worry too much about leaving your garbage, you know, because you are actually struggling to survive. But this is actually a guideline and even a rule to be complied with. So how do you do that, and how to coordinate your efforts with other mountaineers? And this mountaineer, Lars Kristian, Todd Skinner, he had created sort of his 3 basic rules when he went for a mountain summit. Okay, so the rule number 1, his priority number 1 was to survive, and rule number 2 was that whatever he did with his team to learn from their efforts, so that next time they try to summit, they are better equipped than they was when they started this one. And he said, if I achieve 1 and 2, it's a successful attempt at reaching the summit, because there are so many variables, there's so many risks, that priority number 3, reach the summit, is actually only priority number 3. I think this is really wisdom. And the ironic fact here is actually that a couple of years later, Todd Skinner actually fell to his death from on a mountain. But anyway, that doesn't make his 3 priorities less relevant, rather more relevant. It was his equipment that failed him. Anyway, please proceed. Okay, so GRC is about organizing the effort of being in compliance and being risk aware and mitigating risks. It's actually about helping the people, the persons, the colleagues who are already accountable, to help them do what they should be doing and what they should have been doing all along. For instance, creating a unified vocabulary and taxonomy for information related to GRC, establishing common repositories for data, documents, and information, creating standardized procedures, templates for things such as policies, controls, control objectives, how you can create evidence that you are actually, or maybe not, in conformance with the policies and rules that you have decided to be in conformance with, and ensuring regular and consistent communication between all relevant roles. Yes? And the good news is that Servicenow GRC is designed to do all this and even more, and Lars Kristian will return to that in a little while. So what can we do to convince the board of directors or whoever else needs convincing that this is GRC is a valuable endeavor to invest in? So let's look at how to create the GRC business case. And this is a business case where we propose using 3 pillars. One is that GRC is a fact of life. So how can you do GRC? How can you do the GRC practice as efficiently as possible? This is one business case, to convince the board of directors that this is something which we have to be doing. How can we do it efficiently? We can do it by automating control, performance, risk management as much as possible. We can save many hours on risk and control work and reduction of external audit fees. And we can, even if we do it well enough, Deloitte says, I cannot vouch for the validity, but the source is Deloitte, that there's a potential of even self-finance a GRC endeavor within the first year. Okay. The second one is that it's valuable for any organization to be risk aware, knowing what the risk appetite is, and reducing risks by creating an organization around risk awareness and risk mitigation with a corporate ownership. So we can reduce the likelihood, we can reduce the impact of risk events, we can improve compliance with risks that are related to regulatory enforcements, or even the risk of lawsuits from customers or others in society. We can have a more tolerable risk mitigation that is in balance with the actual risks and in balance with our with risk awareness, stated risk appetite, and we can improve the cultural ownership of risks and control. So these 2 pillars are really strong in convincing the board of directors to invest in GRC. And the third one is that we can, based on a better GRC practice, a better strategic decision making and better performance, because we can have more resources investing in achieving our goals and objectives, and less invested in GRC because we are doing it smart and not doing more than necessary. And we can also have better strategic decision making whenever some risk is hitting us, some risk event is hitting us, or we are out of conformance, that we can have a systematic root cause analysis, a problem analysis to identify the root causes and the risk indicators, and therefore it's part of our continual improvement. So yes, please proceed, Lars Kristian.
Søren, your time is
Yes.
running out.
It's good. So who has actually a GRC role in the organization? Okay, and this list, the purpose of this list is that you can use it in your organization to convince that almost everybody in your organization has a GRC role. Okay, board members, senior executive, any management responsibilities, anybody in an audit, risk and compliance role, anybody engaged in strategic planning, responsible for monitoring achievement of established objectives, HR responsibilities for engaging with third parties, supplier management, vendor management, and anybody involved in selecting, implementing, and managing technologies such as IT to support organizational performance. So, you know, this list can hopefully help you convince the organization that GRC is something which should be interwoven with everything you do in the organization. And with that, I think I'm leaving the floor to you, Lars Kristian.
Thank you, Søren. We'll try to make a dive into to the ServiceNow enablement and the structure that we have in this situation. And as Michelle presented when she presented me, was also that I tried to do governance, risk, and compliance activities both as a IT manager, as a consultant with and without the ServiceNow GRC functionality. And I think that I can solely vouch that using it with the GRC module is actually quite a improvement of what you're doing with your practices, and also it can be quite cumbersome as well. So I'm going a little bit into the maturity at the end of it, but let me kind of walk you through the GRC architecture as such. So looking at the basics, what we are looking at is actually that we have some external legislation and regulation that we need to abide. And everyone, I guess, in Europe knows about GRC within the regulation about the GDPR, within the regulation of ISO 20000 information security management and all of that. So there are areas, depending on which kind of business and which kind of enterprise you're in, where you have some regulation that you need to abide through. But you can also have, obviously, internal policies that is important for your business that you put in. So in all these situations, you have some what ServiceNow calls citations, rules or regulations that you need to abide through. And these also comes from the policies that you have in your organization. And ultimately, they are turning into control objectives. So if you have a situation where, you know, we have a rule saying every business within this business sector needs to abide to blah, 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 and all of that, they are quite high level at some point. So you need to translate them into control objectives, saying what you actually needs to control in your organization to say that you're compliant with that regulation, with that citation that you have. And the unified compliance framework, the UCF, gives you the ability within ServiceNow to import these regulations into your systems, and already with that situation inherit some of the control objectives that you have, and also what I'll come into later, control objectives that are actually overlapping. So one authority document can have something that also another authority document has, and if you're abiding from it from the first place, you're actually able to reuse that in your second situation. That then again, everything that we're doing here is about making sure that the risk that we are having, the vulnerability and the threats that we are facing, that we actually have them under control. And as Søren said, the risk is something that could happen, and that has a negative effect on our business that we're trying to either mitigate or prevent that would happen in our organization. And that's obviously something that we then need to look at within the organization, with the vendors that we have, the services that we use, with the structure that we have with the departments within the organization. So all these entities obviously are, they are working with the risk, they're working with the control objectives, and every entity, then needs to look at the controls and also the risk that we have in the organization. And what ServiceNow GRC also puts in is that test plans, indicators, issues that we are having, attestation about someone saying that, yes, we are actually using this in our part of the business, in our department, and we are in compliance with these situations, and we have assessed our risk and also put them into how we can mitigate and respond to if they would ever happen. And also, obviously, if we have some policy exceptions saying for our specific department, this kind of this policy or this area of the authority document does not apply for several reasons. Could be that we are working of implementing something new in the future, so we will be working with that in the second half of the year, and onto that we can get an exception saying that's not compliant with you in that period of time. So with the authority documentation and citations, with the control objectives that we have, with the risk that we identify, with the organization that we need to comply with, all of that is putting into some controls that people, persons, groups of the department needs to work with, and also actually say, yes, we are doing it, yes, we are controlling it in this particular way, either manually or automatically in the organization. So we can put in some trails, we can put in some not road maps as such, but workflows where we can say that this and this and this is actually done, and all of that is then captured within the system. So when we are facing an audit within our situation, we have all the evidence that we need from the controls that we actually are performing, and then we can trace that back to which kind of policies and which kind of authority documentation we are actually upholding in our system. So we have everything within the system organized, worked with, and also shown that evidence that we actually are doing it. So in that situation, when we have an audit, we have a walkthrough or interview, or looking at the actually test that the controls have been put into place and the indicator results that is part of that control, then everything is actually more or less under your fingertip. Then you can have the reports ready, but you can also obviously prepare for an audit by looking into which areas that might not be that well controlled at the moment, because if people have a control and they don't do it, then obviously we have a situation where we have a red indicator, now red, yellow, green indicator that this is actually something that we said we would do that we don't do in our organization.
Lars Kristian, can I throw in a short comment?
Yes, of course, sir.
I just want to emphasize that one thing both you and I are really excited about GRC and the Servicenow platform is that if you are responsible for orchestrating the GRC practice in your organization, what you actually can do in Servicenow is to design how the practice is going to be conducted, and then the Servicenow does all the tedious stuff on your behalf. So it's about really designing and orchestrating and setting things up, and then Servicenow is the motor that runs whatever the responsible persons need to do, and they get a trigger and they need to do something, and it's all quite transparent and measurable. But most of all, it's very the tedious parts are taken out. So thank you.
Yes, you can say that, obviously. I guess what I would like also to share with you is that this architecture picture is obviously very, highlighting, and you should read more about it in the situation, but it's also quite detailed and sometimes a little bit difficult to remember. And one of my mentors, when I started up with the GRC in Servicenow, actually gave me another illustration saying you should look at it as a tree. So we could have called this the Christmas edition of the GRC presentation that we have, because I thought, look at it as a Christmas tree. So the first level is actually that we have something that we need to abide to. So we have an authority documentation that we need to follow and need to make sure that we have that. So that's the tip of our Christmas tree. That's a star in the top that we are looking at, that authority documentation. And it obviously could also be a company policy that we should have in this situation. But for the sake of argument, I leave it to the authority documentation. And at some situations, there always are something say, well, we don't call it citation, we call it clauses, we call it rules, and that's okay. Citation is the title that we chose, or the Servicenow has been chosen to use for the situation where all the the areas that we say this is an area that you need to abide through. So, and then again, the internal policies and also the legislation is turned into control objectives. So these are the kind of the hearts that we put on the tree underneath it. And if we're very good at that part, we could say that we have the entities in our organization, and these control objectives are then turned into packages, controls that some in the organizations need to do. Well, sometimes that's a Christmas package that you might not want to have because it puts in you're in a situation that you need to do something. But again, when you're doing the controls, we can link it to the control objective. Why are we doing it? And that control objective, we can link it to somewhere situations that we have an authority documentation that tells us that we need to do that. We need to comply with that. So the compliance is part of the situation, and the controls is actually the meat and potato. This is where we make sure that we abide to the rules, and we're doing it in a situation that we can say in our organization, we are actually doing governance, risk, and compliance. That's a part of it. So look at this as a Christmas tree. And in some situation, you can also reuse the situations that you have decorated your Christmas tree with an authority documentation that you need to uphold. And this has some citations. You put in some control objectives, either by yourself or you're inheriting from UCF. And then you have some controls that has been doing within your organization by some of your departments or by some systems that you have, or even by vendors. So suddenly a new authority documentation arises in the horizon, something new that we need to comply with. So we have another star with a little pink, area around it where something new is going into our organization. So if we look at it in that situation, we should compare it to what we're doing it, what we're already doing. So the three on the Christmas tree at the left, we can see that there's actually a citation and a control objective within the new area of documentation that we already are doing in the old one. So instead of redoing it again by someone else, we can actually say we have already some control objectives in place. So what we need to do is put in a new control for the new department that we might have. It could be a situation where we are having a new department, or that we are merging with another company. So we have somebody new doing what we are already having in our system. But on the other hand, with a little citation with the pink area around it, we have something new that we then can focus on in our organization. So we can reuse what we already have, and we can focus on the things that we don't have under control in our organization. So with the guy on the left, I'm not really sure if he's exciting or if he's yelling, no, but either way, what we should do in a situation when we have an audit is not saying no, but saying, yes, we are actually prepared for this situation. Because looking at our Christmas tree on the left, we already actually can say we have true authority documentation that we need to abide to, that we have under control because we have control objectives. We're having someone, department, services, whatever, working with it. And looking at that kind of the combined Christmas tree, where like when I trim my Christmas tree and my wife does it, we're not really sure about how to do it because we have a different way of doing it as such, but we can combine it obviously because all the controls are in place. So the controls are there because we need to do something to make sure that we have governance, risk, and compliance actively under control. And we can link that to the control objectives, saying this is why we're doing it. And we can also link it to saying that within these controls, we are actually abiding these citations, these authority documentation. So either way, if you're going top down or bottom up, if you're going top down, you can say, well, I would only have to look at, let's say, the left authority documentation, say, do I abide this? Because this is like, say, ISO 27001 information security management audit that we're having. They are only interested in the ones in the clauses or the amendments that they are looking at, the citation. So they need to make sure that we have that under control. And in another situation, we may have a situation where we audited with, let's say, GDPR. That's the pinkish one on the other side. And obviously, they are only interested in what they are. We're making sure that we are compliant with that. The data protection officer, DPO, might only look at that part. But if you look at it from the ones that are operational, that actually have to do these things, they are looking at the controls and also the explanation why they have to do it. So any basis that we have for an audit is to make sure that we actually are following the rules, the policies, and the regulations. And also, if we have some non-conformities, major or minor, whatever, or we actually have suggestions for improvements, we can put that into the the Christmas tree, or obviously the GRC module, say why are we not complying with that? Is it because controls are not being performed correctly? Is it because there are some citations that we have overlooked? Is it because we have control objectives that are not well defined within the organization? And also make sure that when we then have that, because the GRC module is designed to utilize these regulations, and also make sure that we kind of capture the evidence, make sure that if we're doing an improvement, we can say, if it's given us, benefits, or if it's not giving us benefits, and we wouldn't have to do that in the future. Just a small one, about that I said when they start, should anyone, throw themselves at the Servicenow GRC module and say, yes, this is the way, this is the magic wand. Now everything on the left with the architecture is suddenly there. And obviously, our recommendation, what you should look at is that, for one thing, you should have the Servicenow platform in use in your organization. I would not suggest anyone having GRC at this first module that they will be using, unless it can be connected to some other areas where you need the configuration management database and make sure you have that under control. You also have to accept the purpose of the required regulations. In so many situations where I'm trying to help people making the implementation, sometimes people are saying, how can we, with the least effort, get around it on the best way? And that might not be the best way of going into the GRC module, because, as Søren already said, everything is transparent. So it's obviously you can have a minimal viable product, but you always need to know that this is a journey that you're putting into. So when you're starting on that, you're going into a continual improvement cycle as well, because every time you have an audit, every time you look at a control, every time you look at a control objectives, things can be done better in the future, and you need to actually embrace that and say, that is what we want, this is our purpose. So you have to plan for your governance risk of compliance roadmap, and you have to encourage organizational change management, because actual people are getting actual controls to actually do, and they need to embrace that because otherwise you probably end up in a mess in your organization. So you need to use it, and you need to want to use it. Yes, Søren.
Yes. So wrapping up, we really hope that you have gained some insights and inspiration from this short webinar. So what we have tried to give to you, the outcomes here, is that now you perhaps know more about what to watch out for in your GRC practice, and how you can convince others, both your colleagues and also the board of directors, in how GRC, there's a business case for investing in GRC, and you need to know what you want to be in control of, and why, not the least why, and then balance the effort with the controls required. And we've had one question during the webinar regarding, yes, there are industries where there are specific industry regulations that you need to conform to, and if you don't, you would be out of business. And these industries, the obvious examples are the medical industries and the banking sector. But I was in the oil industry for 5 years, and there were numerous regulations there as well, related to pollution and other things, health, things like that. So yes, there would be general rules and regulations you need to follow, that you choose to follow, and that you should also know the industry specific ones. Furthermore, we hopefully have inspired you to see how ServiceNow can enable structure and transparency, and not the least helping you automate the tedious GRC tasks that may be now done by Outlook and Excel sheets, and even how to be potentially excited about your next audit instead of sort of wishing them like being in a quite different place and not as nice as where you are, to put it politely. So hopefully these are the outcomes you have gained from this webinar. And with that, I'm going to leave it to you, Michelle, to wrap up.
Yes, thank you. So we're actually at the timestamp, but I really hope that I can lure you into just doing a quick poll on what you thought about this webinar, so that we can get even better at doing these webinars. Thank you very much to Lars Kristian and Søren. I'll just launch the poll now. So please, if you have the time, just fill it out. There's only 3 questions. So just put in your vote, and then we can look at how to get even better. Also, wrapping up here, I should say or repeat that you can find the recording tomorrow in your inbox and on our YouTube channel later this week. And I will share all this information on our LinkedIn page. So make sure that you follow us on LinkedIn, because that's where you get the newest information. And also our newsletter will do the same for you. Yeah, and I'm really excited that so many people decided to show up. I know there's a lot of webinars out there, so thank you for keep listening to us. And I'm very, very excited about these webinars. So thank you for letting us keep on doing them. And I think we have got some questions in. You're very, very kind. Thank you very much. I will just end the poll. Okay. And I wish you all a very lovely day. And we will see you next time. We will shortly be announcing the next webinar that we're having. So can you wave, guys, and say bye?
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.